Intrusive thoughts can be extremely unpleasant when it comes to infidelity. And how unpleasant they are can really depend on how much you saw or how many photos you saw or text messages that you saw. But whatever it may be, whether it's big or small, depending on my own perception of it or someone else's, no matter how big it is, it can be really, really frustrating and painful to have those thoughts coming back in against your will over and over and over again. Now, from the perspective of how your unconscious mind works, the reason why we have trauma is because we weren't able to process the painful emotion of something in the moment. And one thing that your unconscious mind does, because it knows how much better your life would be if you could process it, is it kind of shoots it back up to the conscious level for you to process it. And oftentimes there can be a miscommunication of sorts between the unconscious and conscious mind, where we are receiving that communication through the form of like an intrusive thought over and over and over and over again. And yet we are just not actually ready to process it. And so the best way to deal with intrusive thoughts is to fully process it. And that's something that can be done in the context of therapy or journaling or working with me or working with anyone else who's an expert on these things. Now, in the meantime, though, it is really helpful to have a way to mitigate that pain. And this is something that's come up recently, multiple sessions in a row with different people. And so I want to just share one thing you can do right away if you don't have the time right now to fully process it, or if you just don't think that you're ready. So, one thing that you can do is just play around with what is often called submodality work within the field of NLP. NLP is overall a mixed bag of techniques. Sometimes they're really good, sometimes they're not. And this is one that I think is one of the better ones. The idea is that the way that you choose to remember things can have a deep impact on how they feel. So if the intrusive thought keeps coming up over and over and over again, even if you can't stop it from coming up, one thing that you can do is make it so that the image itself, when it does reappear, is less painful than it was before. So what do I mean by that? Well, I would invite you right now to think of the intrusive thought if it's something that you currently are struggling with. And notice, is the picture like this tiny little image off in the distance, black and white, real small, fuzzy, hard to see? No, probably not. When it comes to mind, it probably feels like it's like right up in your face, big bright colors, and just like you can't not look at it because it's so big. One thing that you can do is to reintroduce choice into the equation, is to choose to bring that memory up right now and push it back a little bit. So it doesn't feel like it's right in front of you. It's almost like it's on a sticky note on the wall, kind of that size, and you're looking at it out there. Just getting that distance, you can feel sometimes the relief. I often see people have a deep sigh just by pushing it out because there's some distance finally. One other thing that you can do is put a border around it. It could be like a black border, it could be a white border, it could be like a frame in an image, but just putting that around it often is this subconscious cue that it's in the past, it's distant, it's not something that's real anymore. It was definitely real then, but it's not real anymore. Another thing you can do is to kind of suck the color out of it. Almost imagine a vacuum being put up into the corner and sucking the life out of the image, making it flatter. And then if there are sounds associated with it, maybe you like saw something in person and there were sounds, or there was a video and there were sounds, and that's what you're trying to get rid of from coming up so often. Distort those sounds. And in particular, I suggest making them sound really ridiculous. Make it sound almost like Mickey Mouse or like carnival music or something like that. So that's the first layer, is just kind of getting it out of your immediate sight and making the image itself less compelling. The second thing that you can do is, again, there's just doing these exercises introduces an element of choice, regardless of the exercise, because you're choosing to bring the memory back up instead of having it come up against your will, and you're choosing how you want to think about it. So the second thing that you can do is to take that memory, identify the beginning and the end of the memory, and play it in reverse. So if it starts with you walking into a room and seeing something happening, and slamming the door and running outside and calling someone that you love to be like, I don't know what to do. Like, that's just one scenario. Start with the phone call at the end and then play it backwards to the point of you opening the door, where playing it backwards, of course, you'd be closing it and then just walking back to whatever you were doing beforehand. No, that sounds crazy. Just trust me. Do it. Do it from the end to the beginning, end to the beginning, and do this about 10 times and very, very quickly. You don't want this to be the same speed. You want it to be like if you're rewinding an old VHS or something like that, and you can see it flying backwards. So if it takes 10 seconds to play it forward, it should be like that, playing it backwards. So do that multiple times, and do that with the image kind of distorted, like in that black and white, fuzzy, and then play some carnival music while it's going too. Make the image as absurd as you can. Now, the point isn't necessarily to have this be like, oh, you've tricked your mind. This is a brand new memory. What you've done is made it so that if your mind does go back to it, it's not only going back to the original memory, but it's going back to like this blurred, fuzzy, comical memory now. And I say comical largely because of the music that you would play in your mind with like the carnival music going backwards. So that's something you can do to sort of scramble the neurological impact that that memory would have. And again, the core thing though that needs to happen is to, whether it's right now or within the next couple weeks, get to that root level, work with someone, or do some immense self-reflection yourself to really understand all of the thoughts and feelings that you have around this, and to identify the emotional resources that you need to get through. I hope that helps. See you in the next video.